What are the main gods and goddesses in Scandinavian mythology, and what are their roles and characteristics? Scandinavian mythology is filled with gods, goddesses, and other mythical beings. Here are some of the main deities and their roles and characteristics. 1. Odin. Odin is the god of wisdom, poetry, and war. He is often depicted as a one-eyed old man with a long beard and a wide-brimmed hat, and he is known for his shrewdness and cunning. Odin is also associated with death and the afterlife, as he is said to preside over the halls of Valhalla, where brave warriors go after they die in battle. 2. Thor. Thor is the god of thunder and lightning, and he is known for his strength and bravery. He is often depicted with his magical hammer, Mjolnir, and he is a popular figure in Scandinavian mythology and folklore. 3. Freya. Freya is the goddess of love, fertility, and war. She is often depicted as a beautiful and powerful woman with a chariot drawn by two cats, and she is associated with magic and witchcraft. 4. Loki. Loki is a trickster god who is known for his mischievousness and cunning. He is often depicted as a shape-shifting figure who can take on the form of animals or other beings, and he is both a friend and foe to the other gods and goddesses. 5. Hel. Hel is the goddess of the underworld, and she is associated with death and decay. She is often depicted as a half-dead, half-alive woman who rules over the realm of the dead. 6. Balder. Balder is the god of light and purity, and he is often associated with peace and forgiveness. He is a popular figure in Scandinavian mythology, and his tragic death is one of the most famous stories from this tradition. These are just a few examples of the many gods and goddesses in Scandinavian mythology, each with their own roles, characteristics, and stories. How did the Vikings view their gods and goddesses, and how did these beliefs influence their daily lives and practices? The Vikings believed that their gods and goddesses were powerful supernatural beings who controlled the natural world and human destiny. They believed that these deities could be appeased through offerings, sacrifices, and rituals, and that they could provide protection, good fortune, and blessings. The Vikings saw their gods and goddesses as a part of everyday life, and they incorporated them into their daily routines and practices. For example, they would make offerings to the gods before setting out on a voyage or going into battle, and they would hold religious festivals and ceremonies throughout the year to honor and appease these deities. The Vikings also believed in the concept of fate or destiny, and they believed that their gods and goddesses played a central role in shaping their future. They believed that their actions and decisions were guided by these supernatural beings, and that their fate was ultimately in the hands of these deities. Overall, the Vikings viewed their gods and goddesses as powerful and influential beings who played a central role in their lives and culture. They incorporated these beliefs into their daily practices and rituals, and they saw their actions and decisions as being guided by these supernatural forces. What is the role of fate and destiny in Scandinavian mythology, and how did the Vikings understand the concept of time and history? In Scandinavian mythology, fate and destiny played a central role in shaping the lives and actions of humans and gods alike. The Vikings believed that there was a powerful force of destiny or fate, which they called weird or orlog, that governed the events of the universe. The concept of fate and destiny was closely tied to the idea of time and history in Scandinavian mythology. The Vikings saw time as cyclical rather than linear, with events repeating themselves in a never-ending cycle. They believed that the past, present, and future were all connected, and that the actions of the gods and humans in one era could have consequences that were felt for generations to come. The Vikings also had a strong sense of history, and they placed great importance on the deeds of their ancestors and the stories of their past. They believed that by understanding the actions and struggles of their forebears, they could better understand their own place in the world and their relationship to the gods. Overall, fate, destiny, and the cyclical nature of time played a central role in Scandinavian mythology, shaping the way the Vikings viewed the world and their place in it. The Vikings saw themselves as part of a larger historical narrative, and they believed that their actions could have lasting consequences that would be felt by future generations. What are some of the major myths and stories in Scandinavian mythology, and how have they influenced modern culture and literature? Scandinavian mythology is rich with stories and myths that have inspired countless writers, artists, and creators throughout history. Here are some of the major myths and stories in Scandinavian mythology. 1. Creation myth. In Norse mythology, the world was created from the body of a giant named Ymir. The gods Odin, Vila, and Ve killed Ymir and used his body to create the world, including the seas, mountains, and skies. 2. Ragnarok. The end of the world, known as Ragnarok, was a major event in Scandinavian mythology. It was prophesied that at the end of time, the gods would do battle with the giants and monsters, resulting in the death of many of the major gods and the destruction of the world. 3. The gods and goddesses. There are many gods and goddesses in Scandinavian mythology, including Odin, Thor, Freya, and Loki. Each of these deities had their own personalities, abilities, and roles within the pantheon. 4. The Valkyries. These were female figures who served the gods by selecting warriors who had died in battle to be taken to Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain. 5. Beowulf. This epic poem, written in Old English, tells the story of a hero who fights a series of monsters and dragons. Though it is not strictly a part of Scandinavian mythology, it draws on many of the same themes and motifs. These myths and stories have had a lasting impact on modern culture and literature. They have been retold and adapted in countless forms, from epic poems and novels to movies and video games. They continue to inspire new generations of creators, and their influence can be seen in everything from the fantasy genre to modern pop culture. How did Christianity impact the development of Scandinavian mythology, and what are some of the ways in which these two belief systems intersected and influenced each other? Christianity had a significant impact on the development of Scandinavian mythology, particularly during the Viking Age when Norse paganism was gradually supplanted by Christianity. One of the earliest examples of the influence of Christianity on Scandinavian mythology can be seen in the inscription on the rock runestone in Sweden, which dates back to the 9th century. The inscription contains a reference to the Christian god and also to Odin, indicating that the two belief systems were coexisting at the time. As Christianity spread throughout Scandinavia, many of the old pagan beliefs and practices were absorbed into Christian traditions, resulting in a unique blend of the two religions. For example, many of the gods and goddesses of Scandinavian mythology were assimilated into the Christian pantheon as saints. The most famous example of this is Saint Olaf, who was a king of Norway and is considered a Christian saint, but who was also associated with Odin in Norse mythology. At the same time, Christian beliefs and practices were also influenced by Scandinavian mythology. For example, the idea of a final battle between good and evil, which is a central theme in Scandinavian mythology, was incorporated into Christian eschatology as the concept of the end of the world and the Last Judgment. Despite the influence of Christianity, however, many aspects of Scandinavian mythology survived and continue to be celebrated today in Scandinavia and around the world. Many of the old myths and stories have been passed down through the generations and remain an important part of Scandinavian culture and identity. What are some of the major symbols and motifs in Scandinavian mythology, such as the Valkyries or the World Tree, and what do they represent? Scandinavian mythology is full of symbols and motifs that carry deep meanings and reflect the beliefs and values of the Vikings. Here are a few examples. 1. The World Tree, Yggdrasil. This is a central symbol in Scandinavian mythology, representing the axis mundi or the center of the universe. It connects the 9 worlds of Norse cosmology, with its roots in the underworld and its branches reaching up to the heavens. 2. Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. This is the hammer of the god Thor, and it is a symbol of strength and protection. It was believed to have the power to destroy mountains and was used by Thor to defeat his enemies. 3. Valkyries. These are female figures who served as Odin's messengers and were responsible for selecting the bravest warriors to fight alongside the gods in Valhalla. They were often depicted as fierce and powerful women, riding on horseback and wearing armor. 4. Runes. The ancient Germanic alphabet, known as the runic alphabet, was believed to have magical powers and was used for divination and casting spells. Each rune had a specific meaning and could be used to convey messages or convey magical energy. 5. Fenrir. This is a monstrous wolf, son of Loki, who is prophesied to kill Odin during Ragnarok, the end of the world. Fenrir represents chaos and destruction and is a symbol of the inevitable downfall of all things. These symbols and motifs, among others, continue to be a source of fascination and inspiration in contemporary culture, from literature and film to fashion and design. How did the Vikings understand the afterlife, and what were their beliefs about death and the soul? The Vikings believed in an afterlife that was divided into several different realms, depending on how a person lived their life. Here are a few examples. 1. Valhalla. This was the hall of the god Odin, where the bravest warriors who died in battle would go. They would be welcomed by the Valkyries and spend their days feasting and fighting, preparing for the final battle of Ragnarok. 2. Helheim. What can we learn from Scandinavian mythology about the values, beliefs, and worldview of Viking society, and how have these lessons influenced contemporary culture and society? Scandinavian mythology offers us a glimpse into the values, beliefs, and worldview of Viking society, which was shaped by the harsh and unforgiving environment in which they lived. Here are a few lessons we can learn. 1. The importance of honor and courage. Honor and courage were highly valued in Viking society, and were seen as essential qualities for a warrior. This is reflected in the mythology, with the concept of dying in battle and going to Valhalla being the ultimate honor and glory for a warrior. 2. The cyclical nature of life. Scandinavian mythology reflects the Vikings' understanding of the cyclical nature of life and the importance of balance. The concept of the world tree, for example, represents the interconnectedness of all things, and the idea that everything is in a constant state of change and renewal. 3. The importance of community. Vikings lived in close-knit communities, and the mythology reflects this. Many of the stories involve the gods and goddesses working together to achieve a common goal, and the concept of the fylkja, a kind of personal spirit guide, represents the importance of having a strong connection to one's community. 4. The acceptance of death. The Vikings did not fear death as much as some other cultures, and this is reflected in the mythology. Death was seen as a natural part of life, and the Vikings believed in the importance of living an honorable life in order to ensure a good afterlife. The lessons we can learn from Scandinavian mythology have influenced contemporary culture and society in many ways. For example, the values of honor, courage, and community are still highly valued today, and can be seen in everything from sports to politics. The idea of the cyclical nature of life has also influenced modern environmentalism and sustainability movements. Finally, the acceptance of death and the importance of living an honorable life have influenced contemporary discussions about end-of-life care and hospice care. How did Scandinavian mythology evolve over time, and what are some of the major differences between the earlier and later versions of these stories and beliefs? Scandinavian mythology evolved over time, and there are some notable differences between earlier and later versions of these stories and beliefs. Here are a few examples. 1. The shift from polytheism to monotheism. In the early days of Scandinavian mythology, the Vikings were polytheistic, and worshipped a large pantheon of gods and goddesses. However, with the arrival of Christianity in the region, many people began to convert to this new faith, and the belief in a single, monotheistic god began to replace the belief in multiple gods and goddesses. 2. The influence of Christian mythology. With the spread of Christianity in the region, many elements of Christian mythology began to be incorporated into Scandinavian mythology. For example, the story of Ragnarok, the end of the world, has some similarities to the Christian concept of the apocalypse. 3. The influence of historical events. The mythology of any culture is shaped by the historical events and experiences of that culture. In the case of Scandinavian mythology, the Vikings' interactions with other cultures, such as the Anglo-Saxons, and their experiences with trade and warfare influenced the stories and beliefs they developed. 4. The impact of written language. As the Vikings began to develop a written language, Old Norse, the mythology began to be recorded in writing. This led to the preservation of many stories and beliefs that might otherwise have been lost over time. 5. The influence of modern interpretations. In the modern era, Scandinavian mythology has been interpreted and reinterpreted by many different scholars and artists. This has led to the development of new stories, interpretations, and adaptations, which sometimes differ significantly from the earlier versions of these stories and beliefs. Overall, the evolution of Scandinavian mythology reflects the changing beliefs, experiences, and cultural influences of the Vikings over time. How did Scandinavian mythology influence the development of other mythological traditions, such as Germanic, Celtic, or Slavic mythology? Scandinavian mythology, like many other mythological traditions, was not isolated in a vacuum. It had a significant influence on the development of other mythological traditions in Europe, particularly those of the Germanic, Celtic, and Slavic peoples. One of the most obvious examples of this influence is the similarity between the gods and goddesses of Scandinavian mythology and those of other Germanic mythologies, such as the Anglo-Saxon and Germanic pantheons. For example, the Norse god Odin is closely related to the Anglo-Saxon god Woden, and the Germanic god Wotan. Similarly, the god Thor is related to the Germanic god Donar. The influence of Scandinavian mythology on Celtic mythology is less clear, but there are some similarities between the two traditions. For example, there are stories of shape-shifting and transformation in both traditions, and there are some similarities in the way that the two traditions portray their gods and goddesses. In the case of Slavic mythology, there are some similarities between the Scandinavian and Slavic pantheons, particularly in the way that both traditions portray their gods as having multiple functions and aspects. However, there are also some significant differences between the two traditions, particularly in the way that they understand the concept of the afterlife and the role of the gods in the natural world. Overall, the influence of Scandinavian mythology on other mythological traditions is an interesting area of study, and it highlights the ways in which different cultures and societies have influenced each other throughout history. What are some of the major artifacts and archaeological finds related to Scandinavian mythology, and what do they tell us about Viking culture and religion? There are a number of major artifacts and archaeological finds related to Scandinavian mythology that provide valuable insights into Viking culture and religion. Here are a few examples. 1. The Oseberg ship. This Viking ship was discovered in Norway in 1903 and is believed to have been built around 820 AD. Among the many artifacts found on board were a number of intricate carvings depicting scenes from Scandinavian mythology, including depictions of the god Odin and the goddess Freya. 2. The Lewis chessmen. These 12th-century chess pieces were discovered on the Isle of Lewis in Scotland in the 19th century and are believed to have been made in Norway. Many of the pieces depict figures from Scandinavian mythology, including kings, queens, knights, and bishops. 3. The Gokstad ship. This Viking ship was discovered in Norway in 1880 and is believed to have been built around 890 AD. Among the many artifacts found on board were a number of carvings and decorations depicting scenes from Scandinavian mythology, including depictions of the god Odin and the goddess Freya. 4. The Snoldeleaf Stone. This runestone was discovered in Denmark in 1761 and is believed to date back to the 9th century. The stone features an inscription in Old Norse that includes a number of references to the god Odin. These artifacts and others like them provide valuable insights into Viking culture and religion, and they help us to better understand the ways in which the Vikings saw and interacted with their gods and goddesses. They also demonstrate the ways in which Scandinavian mythology was integrated into the everyday lives of Viking people, both through art and through ritual practices. How have contemporary artists and writers drawn inspiration from Scandinavian mythology, and what are some of the ways in which these stories continue to resonate with modern audiences? Some possible questions to explore include: in what ways have contemporary artists and writers, such as Neil Gaiman or Marvel Comics, drawn on Scandinavian mythology for inspiration in their work, and what themes or motifs do they tend to focus on? What are some of the challenges and opportunities involved in adapting or retelling Scandinavian myths for modern audiences, and how have different artists and writers approached these issues? How have popular culture depictions of Scandinavian mythology, such as the TV series Vikings or the video game God of War, shaped public perceptions of Viking culture and religion, and what are some of the strengths and limitations of these representations? What are some of the ways in which Scandinavian mythology continues to inspire and influence contemporary art, literature, and culture, and what can we learn from these ongoing connections between past and present? What can we learn from the themes and motifs in Scandinavian mythology, such as the struggle between order and chaos or the importance of courage and honor, and how can we apply these lessons to our own lives and society? Some possible ways to approach this question are: explore the key themes and motifs in Scandinavian mythology, such as the conflict between gods and giants, the importance of fate and destiny, or the role of the hero. What do these stories teach us about the values and beliefs of Viking society, and what universal lessons can we draw from them? Examine how different characters in Scandinavian mythology embody certain virtues or qualities, such as Thor's strength, Loki's cunning, or Odin's wisdom. How do these traits contribute to the larger themes of the stories, and what can we learn from these models of behavior and character? Consider how Scandinavian mythology reflects the complexities and contradictions of human nature, such as the tension between order and chaos, or the struggles between different social classes or genders. How can we use these stories as a lens for understanding the challenges and opportunities facing our own society and culture today? Look at how Scandinavian mythology has been interpreted and reinterpreted over time, and how different artists, writers, and thinkers have used these stories to explore their own ideas and experiences. What can we learn from these creative adaptations, and how can we use them as a source of inspiration and reflection in our own lives?